second countdown to Calvary conversation, where we have another prophetic, powerful woman of God who is going to dialogue with us for the next hour. And so grab your devices, share this feed on all social media platforms as we are sharing in Countdown to Calvary. And we have proud graduate of the Tennessee State University, Drew Theological Seminary, and she even studied with one of my favorite theologians, James Cone, at the Union Seminary. And so we are excited about her. So Reverend Maria is sharing this feed on her social media platforms, and she is the proud pastor of the Taylor Chapel Church, the African Methodist Episcopal Church in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And she is also a professor at her alma mater, Tennessee State University. And we are just honored and humbled to share with her. I met her many years ago at the Joshua Conference at the St. James Church in Newark, New Jersey. And when she came to Miami with Dr. Watley, because Dr. Watley said, I'm going to Miami in the middle of the winter. And we in New Jersey, we going.
Absolutely.
And, she blessed us. She preached the early service. And so we are grateful and honored and humbled to introduce the Reverend Babydoll Kennedy, the Reverend Doctor, Pastor, Prophet, Preacher. Good evening, Reverend. How you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
We are grateful. And so let me, Reverend Maria, let me share this feed on my social media platforms while you say hey to the people.
Hey, people. Good afternoon, everybody. I am so excited about this conversation. I'm looking forward to it. As we always do, I see you giving us your shout outs as you come on in the room. So as you're coming in, if you haven't already given us your shout out to let us know you're here, please do get your questions ready. And we were blessed last week. Good evening, good evening. And I'm looking forward and expecting blessings tonight. The Lord is in this place, and we have one of his favored and anointed servants with us tonight. So I am very excited, extremely excited that we're going to get this started. So come on, everybody. Come on in.
I have just shared it on all of these doggone groups that people be putting me in, Reverend. And we share it on our church's page as well as our personal pages. And so I've already introduced you. Reverend, we were able to be a blessing to the Bowling Green, Kentucky family as tornadoes ripped through that area. And this pastor was not one who was just looking for photo ops, but she was looking for drills and chainsaws. So she is MacGyver, all of that. She be fixing stuff. She does graphics. She does websites. She does all of those kind of things.
Do you sing too? Because I'm just.
I mean, you can preach. Do you
can
sing?
You sing too?
You write? Do you sing?
Oh,
do you have all the gifts?
Well, I'm working in that tenfold ministry.
Okay.
And so, Reverend, so can you tell us a little bit about the experiences that you've had recently through the disasters and how that has really, as we would say, showing love out loud at ITLOL, how that has really made the Bible come alive in the lives of others as they've seen believers coming together, finding needs and meeting needs.
Absolutely. First, thank you for having me on your for your Lenten series. And secondly, I want to thank you all out loud for your generous donation that you gave to Taylor Chapel for the disaster. Because what ended up happening was there were a few churches that reached out to us right after it happened, and you were one of the few that actually gave us money to help us in our efforts to help people. I'm sorry, I had to plug up my laptop. So with that money, we were able to actually do ministry. What happened was on the morning of December 11th, there were 3 tornadoes that ripped through Bowling Green. And it wasn't known until like two days later that it was actually 3 tornadoes and not 2. They thought it was twin tornadoes, but it was actually 3. And so, as you can imagine, the area was devastated. I tell people it was like 9/11 when I pulled up into Bowling Green, because whenever you have a tornado or a disaster like this, it changes the skyline. And so on my way to church, normally what was a wooded area that I never could really see was totally flattened.
Oh,
And
wow.
so all the trees were flattened, and it allowed me to look over into the Creekwood area, one of the hardest hit areas. And, you know, tornadoes, they have no respect for anything. And the way it just ripped through that area, it was gut wrenching. And especially how it just opened up the tree line so you could see it. And so we had over 1,000 businesses and homes destroyed and damaged, thousands of people displaced. And this is all overnight. And remember, the tornado hit at night. It hit at night, and there were entire families wiped out. There were 2 families, a Bosnian family and an African-American family, lost every member in the household.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And you can only imagine the heartbreak that caused people. And you don't have to know the people personally. All you have to do is be human and understand pain. And so while they were doing search and rescue, I'm trying to lead prayer groups and put out the family's names to all my prayer partners to just pray, because the prayer request became just let them find the people before it rains. It wasn't anything like, you know, well, let this happen, let us get money. It was just let them find my niece before it rains. And so I'm the type of person, I'm a hands-on person. So I know my church is small and we didn't have a lot of money. So my thing was, how can I go and assist the people? So I went and I partnered with Samaritan's Purse. We were out there with, like you said, with chainsaws. But in this particular group, they didn't let me use the chainsaws because we have professional volunteers that were using the chainsaws. We're cutting trees back off of houses and whatnot, doing what we can. Because for me, in that moment, they needed to see the leadership leading. And you lead in a variety of ways. It's not like you said, you don't lead by photo ops. You don't lead by doing live streams on your social media. I'm at this place, look at this disaster. You lead by going out being compassionate and asking people what do they need help with. Lending a helping hand, because I got halfway through the day at the house before they even realized I was clergy. And then they're like, oh my goodness, I've just been bossing you around. And I'm like, I can follow orders. Because sometimes the best way to lead is to follow. And so by following instructions, I was showing others that you don't always have to be in charge. There are people that know things better than you. So your best bet is to fall in line and assist with the process that's already at hand. And so I had to go out there and, you know, be boots on the ground, helping with that. And then, like you said, that whole your Love Out Loud ministry was allowed us to feed people. And that's one thing Jesus always said. He said they want to send people away because they were going to break for lunch and people were going to go get food. And I was like, nope, we have money. We're going to feed the people. And they were tremendously blessed. So every time we had an event where we were using volunteers, we fed them. We fed the volunteers to thank them for their service and their generosity, because they didn't have to come out and lend a hand because their houses weren't destroyed. but it was just the heart of ministry within those people and within those companies. So we had a youth group from Clarksville, the young Kingsmen. They came and helped. It was just tremendous. It was a blessing.
So, Reverend, since we are in this Lenten season, one of the things that I would love for you to talk about is, what do you see as lessons during the focus on Jesus's transition from, to the cross, on his way to the cross? What are the lessons, or what do you see in his journey that spoke or speaks to what you experienced in the crisis that your community went to? And how do you connect that to the gospel story, and especially to the compassion and the passion story that we are journeying through right now in this Lenten season?
As we journey to the cross, some of the takeaways for me was, number one, learn how to listen. And we listen with our head, our ears, and our heart.
Hold up, say that one more. Hold up, Reverend. That's good stuff. Say that one more time for the people in the back and way upstairs.
I say we listen with our head, our ears, and our heart. So you have to be an active listener. And then when people tell you something, do what it is that they're asking you. So if people are asking you for money, that's not the time for you to go out and buy a whole bunch of stuff from Walmart. Okay.
My Lord, listen.
Because what we ran into was this whole consumer culture that we have created in America, where when a disaster happens, everybody wants to go shopping for somebody else, versus listening to what people are saying. So when I look at Jesus was always trying to Jesus was always hands-on with the people, putting himself in their shoes, hence the reason he came. And so I had to sit back and think about, how would I feel if I just lost everything overnight? How would I feel if somebody brought me a bag of donated clothes that were stained, worn out, and whatnot? How would I feel about that? How would I feel about people bringing me a whole bunch of used products when I've lost everything? And I want a little bit of hope. And so we started, my church, we started accepting new items. And if you couldn't do new, we would take a donation, because there were things like people needed gas money. People wanted to go and buy their own shoes, their own clothes. And they weren't, somebody at one point said beggars can't be choosy. And I had to correct them. I said, first of all, Bowling Green is not begging for anything. Be real clear. What we're doing is we're doing an act of service and an act of kindness. So if they say money, then we give them money. We don't take the money and be like, well, what do you actually need? Because I can go on Amazon and buy it. No, let them allow them to have some type of dignity, because they've lost it all. So give them the money and allow them. And I learned this from you all, honestly, about just giving them the gift cards and letting people go purchase their own items, and not trying to dictate how they move through this particular season. Because that's what we want to do. We want to dictate how they move through the season, instead of just being the vessel and listening to what the people are asking for and requesting. It's like, think about the woman with the issue of blood. When she touches Jesus' garment, she's healed. Now imagine if Jesus wasn't Jesus and wasn't compassionate and listen and tried to listen to people would come with different ailments and he'd heal something totally different. But Jesus listened to the people. And so in listening, people get what they receive. Get what they're asking for and what they're requesting. And so that was the major thing that I had to sit back. I had to sit and I had to listen to the tornado victims, listen to other agencies and groups that were out there working. We worked with Samaritan's Purse, and they had some great skills, because this is a ministry where they go out anytime a disaster happens, they deploy. That's just what they do. Mm-hmm. And they do it with a heart of compassion. And they told us when we were cleaning up this yard, they said, what we have to do is we want to leave this yard better than it was when we came, and better than it was before the storm.
My mind.
So going that extra effort, that shows us that the ministry of Christ, because when Christ encountered people, people were left better than they were before they even got in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
And even though we're sitting there like they want us to cut down another tree, that tree wasn't even hit. But, you know, we're there to help. We're there to serve. And we did what they asked. And we listened to the people. And I stood at one point, the homeowner was sitting there and he was just talking to me because he just needed to talk. Because people want to tell you about what happened. And so I sat and I listened. And he was thankful for that. You know, because sometimes we want to go and dictate what needs to be done versus listening.
Yeah, I think, Reverend, I found in our dealings, whether it's disasters here locally in South Florida with hurricanes or dealing with disasters in Haiti. I'll never forget the hurricane hit South Florida, and I was driving and having a conversation with our vice chair, and I was like, let's get some sandwiches. And she was like, no, Pastor, let's get a food truck. And then hot food. People want hot food. Hot food. We were both being compassionate, but she was like, no, let's take this to another level. Let's get a food truck. So the food truck went from 1 day, Pastor, to 5 days in 5 different locations because we simply found needs, met needs. And then I started talking about, well, if I'm out of electricity for a week, how am I going to wash clothes? So that's when we decided to go ahead and take over the laundromats. And we're sitting in there giving out. I'm like, no, you know, you got free. What you mean? I can wash my clothes free. Yes, ma'am. And so people have a tendency not to know how to receive because they've been broken so much that by people, what you mean, you know, the church, I don't want anything. No, we just here's, you know, if you want to come check us out one Sunday, we'd be glad to have you. If you want to pray, we'd be glad to pray. But this is about what Jesus said, and you said that so well. He found needs, he met needs.
And it sounds like loving my neighbor as myself, because that's what I heard you saying also, that people don't want the used hand-me-down clothes in that moment. And you can put yourself compassionately in their place. Another thing that I love that Jesus does, and I heard you reflecting this in what you were saying, Reverend, is that going beyond, above and beyond, going the extra mile. So you just preached about this when the wine was running out. He didn't just make, you know, the twist off top wine. He made the best possible wine, better than they had ever tasted, going above and beyond. So you mentioned, Reverend, that we have to listen with our heads, our hearts,
and our
ears. And our ears. But how do we listen with our hearts? Can you talk more about that part?
That's where the compassionate element comes in. That's when you sit and you try to sit and put yourselves in their shoes. You know, if like I said, I sat and I wondered, you know, what it would feel like if I just endured this horrific category 4 or 5 tornado, and all of my belongings are scattered for miles. What do I need? What would I want in that moment? You know, would I want people running up to me with what we call the blessing bags, a whole bunch of toiletries and toothpaste and stuff? And that's good in the first phase. Or do I want people to listen? Do I want people to just say, I see you, we're here to help. What do you need me to do? I'm here for you. I'm at your service. Because a lot of people didn't quite get that when people were like, I'm just here to help you. Just tell me, do you want me to pick up a trash bag and start picking stuff up? What do you want me to do? Because again, they thought you wanted something in return. No, we're here to help you. I want you to know that we see you. We see what's happened. We see your pain, although we didn't experience it. We're trying our best to try to figure out how to help and minister you through this. So tell me what it is that we need to do. Show the church how to be helpful in this situation. Because at times we think just because we're the church or because we have a title, we know everything. When we don't, different disasters affect people differently in different areas. And that's something that I was learning. Because if you're hit in the middle of the night, that means you didn't have a lot of time, because this was like 2-3 in the morning. You didn't have a lot of time to gather up a whole bunch of stuff. And so that means you're probably out at the elementary school where they set up for the people to go in your pajamas. And so then how do we minister in that moment? And so with the heartfelt compassion was, number one, trying not to be judgmental, because tornado victims came in all colors, sizes, economic backgrounds. Even those with money, they were just as devastated as those who didn't have money or insurance. And so in those moments, we were able to really touch the hearts of the people and allow them to touch us in ways in which we hadn't really seen, because it was, again, we had to sit back and listen and understand we didn't know everything. We're trying to give them these items, and they're like, no, we're beyond that phase. We're in the phase where we need shoes now. So then you get the shoes. Okay, we're beyond that phase now. Now we need home. We need a home. Okay, now we're beyond that phase. Now we need stuff to go in the house. And now we're beyond. Now we need rent money. We need car insurance money, and stuff like that. And listening to them.
Yeah, I think, Reverend, one of the things that I often tell folks in our overseas mission work, let's not send stuff. Let's give money, because the dollar can circulate in the economy. So that means that, and Haiti is a prime example. We've sent money. We've also taken money when Haiti was open and we could. So which means that the people at the bank had a job. The people who delivered the food had a job. The people who stocked the shelves at the Sam's warehouse had a job. The people working in the office had a job. So the dollars kept circulating, and that's what we help people understand. People need resources, so that means the dollars, because people's livelihoods are at stake in the midst of the crisis. And yes, people will try to take advantage of, but that's why the Bible says you got to try the Spirit by the Spirit, and be led. Okay, y'all. We've been having a great conversation in this countdown to Calvary conversation with Pastor Kennedy from the Taylor Chapel Church in Bowling Green, Kentucky, where tornadoes ravaged that area a few months ago, and we were able to share in Love Out Loud. And so we're taking questions about, I think that was a major piece, Reverend, and we're really, in this Lenten season, we're trying to help people to see that everything we go through reminds us of what Jesus went through, from birth to death and resurrection. And Jesus often dealt with crisis. And I think you talked about it, that he was compassionate. I think the Greek word, and you were more scholar than I am, Reverend, that word compassion meant that he was moved in his bowels, in his loins. He was moved. And so, yeah, I paid attention. Praise God for Logos Bible Study, because I didn't take Greek. And so that kind of things that should move us to want to find needs and meet needs, not just in the crisis, but if that's who we are before the crisis comes. When the crisis comes, we are already ready to go to work.
Absolutely.
So do we have questions?
All right, drop your questions.
I'm so grateful to God that we have so many people who are with us tonight. What questions do you have about how we operate in the Spirit during times of crises? I think one of the questions I have is really about how you led your congregation, who may have in fact also been hit by the tornadoes, but also were being called to serve in the midst of that. How did you navigate that with them? I'm thinking that you had some church folk who were like, I can't do that, I got my own stuff going on. So how did you share and lead through that in terms of leading the congregation in the various places that they may have been affected, and even not necessarily always feeling so compassionate themselves?
Okay, well, thankfully nobody in my congregation lost their homes. But again, when your city is hit, then you're hit. Okay. And so what they started doing is if I'm in a community and I know somebody that was hit, then I'm going to tell you that the Lord told me to take my tithes over there to them. I can't argue with that. So they're doing that. And then I had members that were volunteering day in and day out at these other locations, sorting through stuff, to the fact where they were bone tired. And so that's where I started bringing in volunteers from Clarksville, Tennessee to Bowling Green, because they needed a break.
Now, how far is Clarksville to Bowling Green?
An hour and 15 minutes.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
But here's the thing. Along the way to Bowling Green, you have Russellville, you have Franklin, you have Logan County, and those areas were in the path of the tornado. So the tornado barely it hit the top part of Clarksville, but we didn't get a direct hit like the other areas. So a lot of people were able to come to Bowling Green, with all their strength and might and what have you, and volunteer for the whole day. And some came back a couple of more times to give the volunteers in the city a rest. So that was one of the things I kept trying to stress to my congregants. Make sure you rest. Make sure you rest, because I had one member who was also on a board of the Black Historical Museum. And so he's sorting at one church, helping drop off stuff at our church, then running over here trying to do an interview over for the news cameras. And then I had others who were trying to go to work, come back and volunteer. And it was a matter of, make sure you rest. Let these people who are in here during this first phase, let them do the work, because they're going to be gone in a minute. So let them work real hard that first week, and then you start volunteering. And again, everybody's not going to volunteer. That's not going to be everybody's calling. And so what I've learned is you can't get mad because you run out boots on the ground and others are just sitting back, not doing anything. You have to focus on what it is that the Spirit is leading you to do in the moment and get that done. And let everything else just fall where it may, because that's not your business. Your business is to help those who God is sending you to go help and minister to. So mind your business and stay in your lane.
Yeah, I think, Reverend, and you talked about this, and I really want you to kind of speak a little bit more about this. I believe we are seeing an era where denominational lines are being very blurred, that we're finding who we can connect with to serve. And I want you to talk about that, because you really talked about collaboration early on. But I think the question I would raise is, how do we, beyond the crisis, continue those collaborations, and not just, I don't need us to come together for Ash Wednesday service. I don't need us to come together for Monday, Thursday, and watch some feed. No, how can we have long-term collaborations that can really make changes in local communities?
Long-term collaborations. That's a good question. I know with my community and my church, one of the things that I did was I let them know where the donations were coming from, because we got a sizable donation from a church in New Jersey, a Baptist church. And it was just out of the blue. I'm friends with the pastor on Facebook, and he was like, "Hey, we're trying to get something to you. What do you need? We put it in the mail. Here's the tracking, this, that, and the third." So I was intentional in explaining to them that this was a Baptist brother friend of mine, a church from New Jersey, who saw this on the news and reached out to us. And so in the coming months, I think the thing is going to be for me to introduce them on a more personal level to him and his ministry, so they can see that these people don't just talk the talk, but they actually walk the walk. So it's a matter of going beyond the tornado and making those connections, and letting them see that again, disasters aren't denominational.
And say that one more time, Reverend. Say that one more time for the people in the back.
I said disasters aren't denominational. And what we have to do is we have to get out of this mode of thinking that, as long as my people weren't impacted, then I'm good. If your community was impacted, then you're not good. Because we're supposed to serve the people, not just the Methodists or the AMEs. And so one of the things too that started to happen, there were people in the community that were in need. They weren't even hit by a tornado. I had a family come to the church, and the lady was like, I'm just going to be honest. I just got out of a bad relationship. No, I was not a tornado victim, but me and my kids left with everything in our car, and that's all we have. Can you spare some toiletries? Because she knew everybody was overloaded with toiletries. So we let them come in, and we actually were able to give them a couple of outfits, give the kids some toys, and give her the toiletries and paper goods that she needed. Because again, even though it's a disaster, the tornado has hit. People have different tornadoes in their lives that may not be constructed by nature. It could be a tornado of a relationship that has hit them. And we have to be careful about turning those people away during times like that, especially when we have excess and stuff with so many goods and products that have been brought into the community. Because one thing we don't want to do is we don't want to push people aside who have a need, but the need isn't the specific need that we're trying to meet at the moment.
So for those who are just joining us, we're talking this in our countdown to Calvary conversation. Today, we're talking about how Jesus deals with crisis and how the gospel story is made real. And Reverend Babydoll, pastor of the Taylor Chapel Church in Bowling Green, Kentucky, talks about how it's telling us how it was made real and is being made real in the lives of people who have just gone through a crisis of a natural disaster called a tornado. Those of us who live in South Florida know we've gone through hurricanes, but we're also in another crisis trying to come out of this pandemic. And so, Reverend, you touched on it earlier about the psychological effects of crisis. How have you had to walk the fine line of, no, we're not trained therapists, but what I like to call, I like to tell people, I'm a crisis counselor. I can get you through this crisis, but I'm not the person that can sit down and talk to you every month or every week or every 2 weeks. Let's talk about, okay, how can we get you through this crisis? But I've got to pass you on to a professional. So how have you had to navigate that? Because I can just imagine from adults, seniors, and the young people, in not only we're dealing with a pandemic, but we're dealing with this crisis. And like you said, people want to find hope, and they're looking for places that can offer hope. And the church is one of those places, as far as we're concerned, the place that can offer hope. How have you had to kind of navigate that?
That's a really good question. I think when we were out there working with Samaritan's Purse, and I saw that my team was comprised of what I call professional disaster volunteers. We had people who are EMS workers, emergency room physicians, emergency room nurses, and they took off from their jobs to come and help with this. And they were doing what they needed to do to help get people through the moment. And as I was watching them, I saw that whole compassion, because they'd done this so much. They knew when to stop and listen. They knew when to pick up and keep going. And their thing was, well, when we were over and we helped over in this country, when this happened, man, look at how that country bounced back. That was the hope that they brought to us. Like, we've been here in other situations in other parts of the world where it's happened. And eventually people start to bounce back. You start to get that little hope back. During the pandemic, because it's like, it seemed like we were going from bad to worse, because that was around the time Omicron started taking over. We had Delta and Omicron, and so that they're mentally fatigued from COVID. They're mentally fatigued from social isolation, and now you're trying to throw everybody together because of a tornado that's happened. Let's tease out what it is we're going through right now. Are we overwhelmed with people or overwhelmed with disaster? Like you said, I can help get you through the disaster. I can help get you through this crisis, but you're going to need long-term help. One of the things that I found myself doing with people was just being honest about the situation. It sucks. It really does. This is unfair.
Say that one more time for the people in the back, Reverend.
You have to be honest. How in the world is this fair when the tornado destroys my house, but right across the street, that house is still standing, and I know they're selling drugs out that house. So, I mean, you have to articulate what people are actually feeling. And that right there lets them know they're not going crazy. And it helps them to realize they are not alone. And for Ash Wednesday, I know you said about the whole Ash Wednesday service, but we collaborated with the United Methodist Church. And one of the things that I did in my Ash Wednesday sermon was I was real honest about the dilemma that I was having about asking people to give up something when everything has been taken away from them.
That's rich, Reverend. That's rich.
And so it was interesting because a lady came to me afterwards. She was like, I'm so happy you came. She was like, you said what we've been thinking and feeling. And so just to articulate what they feel, that helps them a whole lot, because people want to know that they're not crazy. They want to know that they're not overreacting. Every time it rains, every time the forecast calls for rain, they're not going crazy because they're becoming terrified of another tornado. That's post-traumatic stress. That stuff is real. And we have to give voice to it and allow them to own that, and then start to point them in directions where they can start to receive long-term help. One of my cousins that was with me for the break, I mean, some people follow my Facebook, he's the 14-year-old. And I was asking him one day, I said, what do you think the kids need most who have gone through this tornado? He thought for a second, he said therapy. He's 14. He lost his mother to COVID. He said the thing they need most is therapy, someone to talk to, so they can understand what they're feeling. So they can understand, in moments when they're enraged, how to start to give voice to it, to understand that this is what they're angry about. We're angry about we lost our house and lost everything, and now we're in a new community, and I've got all this stuff that I don't know where it comes, what it's for, where it's from, and all I want is my Nintendo DS with all my games.
Right.
And those are real things that we don't really think about. And then, like I said, I can help you through it. And then we have to start, like you said, pointing people in direction of long-term help, even if that means opening our church up for support groups, bringing somebody in once a month to let the people talk and to talk to the people. So yeah, those are some serious issues.
All right, y'all. We've been having this. We let y'all in at the dinner table that Reverend Babydoll and Pastor Reverend Maria and I would be having. We were just sitting around hanging out, and so we need your questions. We have about a little bit less than 20 minutes, 23 minutes and counting to go. So let's give your questions, drop them. If you don't feel comfortable in dropping in the chat, please send us a text on the side, and then the pigeon will bring it to the studio, and we can share in this question. So now is the time, please, to drop your questions on as we are journeying through this Lenten season. So yes, we're talking about crisis and chaos, but other things that the Lord is laying on your heart about this Lenten season. We've got these great scholars in Reverend Maria and Reverend Babydoll who can answer all y'all questions because they was paying attention in class, and we are grateful. And so please drop your questions. Go ahead, Reverend.
I'm curious about some of the theological issues that you had to walk people through. I remember with Hurricane Katrina, and there was so much bad theology that God had sent that for all these various reasons. Mm-hmm. I know that when crisis happens, people do have questions like, where was God? And these theological questions about God, things questioning God. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you walk that with not just your congregation, but also the community?
Yeah, that whole question of theodicy.
Yes, theodicy. Tell us what that is for those who may not have been paying attention in class.
Now, I was paying attention that day. Now, come on now. I can put myself out there, but you ain't going to throw me under the bus. No, this way.
It's this whole notion, if God is wholly good, then why do bad things happen? And so, like, my thing was, I was like, well, they've been talking about global warming. We've not heeded the call. And this right here was Mother Nature rebelling. I'm like, we had the warm front, the cold front. They had been explaining it on the news for the whole week, and we wasn't quite paying attention because we didn't think it was gonna evolve into anything. And then next thing we know, it's just ravaging 3 or 4 states. So it's not God doing this. It's because we weren't good. We have not been good stewards over the earth. So these storms are getting stronger. Tornado Valley has shifted east, and so that's the result. Where is God? God is in the helpers. That's what I tell people. It's like Mr. Rogers talked about, whenever a tragedy would happen, he'd ask his mother questions about it, and she would tell him to look for the help. I always tell them, look for the help. Look at these hundreds of people, thousands of people who have taken off from their jobs. They're using their vacation time to come here and cut trees down, to come here and pick up trash and metal and stuff. They're not getting paid. They're paying their way here, paying for their own flights, their own airfare. They're paying to stay at the churches where they're being housed at, to help you. We had people from Michigan, California, New York. That's where we see God. We see God in the people that have come out here to help, people who have brought you stuff, people who have collected items for you. That's where we see the hand of God moving. We see God in people who just sit and listen. That's the ministry in essence. No, we can't reverse what happened, but we can be there for you and with you as you try to pick up the pieces of your lives and try to figure out what your new normal is going to look like. God is in the checks that people drop off saying, I want to pay the rent for these people for X number of months. That's where God is. God is in people, in those who come and say, you know what, I have a roofing business. I can put your roof on. Now, it may not be for free, but it's 50% off. You know that people are trying to minister as best they can. So that's where we start to see God. We see God when people are advocating for the community, telling people don't bring another truckload of trash, because what's happening is you're dropping off your good stuff here and then bringing us what's left. You see God in the fact that there were people trying to bring supplies to Bowling Green, and I specifically told them, stop in Logan County. Bowling Green has a lot. Logan County didn't make the news. Telling them, look, travel the path of the tornado and look at those smaller communities. I was getting windows installed in my house, and the guy that was installing them was telling me, because he lived in Dawson's Creek that was hit, and he was telling me about what happened there, and how they were in the storm cellar trying to just survive. And he told his son, we've got to hold on to this door for dear life, or else we're going to get sucked up into it. I had 2 chainsaws laying around my house that I was not going to use because they were gas powered. I use battery powered tools because I know they don't have that much kick. I gave him the 2 chainsaws. That's where we see God. We have a lot of excess with certain things. You don't even mow your own grass. Give your mower to them. Things that you want to sell, give certain things to those people that you know that they might need. That's where we see the hand of God. We see God, when people are giving out the gas cards, those that volunteered. We had the empty Sears building where the major donations came through. We saw God when Purdue brought the chicken to Kentucky. The food trucks that were coming in. We saw God in the ministries that donated money to Bowling Green for us to give out to the people. That's where we see God. And we don't ever want to overlook the fact that God is in our hands and in our feet, and not just, in the healing aspect, because God actually sends people out to do real work.
My. Well, we got a question here from Facebook. Okay, so YouTube, is your turn next. Did you run into any prideful people? If so, how did you deal with them or get them to understand that you were there to help?
That's a really good question. And I had actually written that down and forgot to bring that up. But yes, and believe it or not, I ran into prideful ministers.
No.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Didn't
want to admit that they were in need. And so I had called a friend of mine. I said, do you know any people that are in need? And she was like, well, I know this one minister whose house was hit, and they're in a hotel and all this stuff. And she was like, but this person doesn't really want, anybody doesn't want the help because they don't want to do X, Y, and Z. And so I was like, give me that person's number and let them know I'm going to call. So I called this person, and I had a real frank conversation. I was like, you have a whole hotel bill that needs to be paid. You didn't have food. You've got 2 vehicles that were totaled. You've got windows that are messed up. You need some help. Let us help you. let us, that's pretty much how I come off. I'm like, let me help you. We have people who want to help you. Do not deny us this opportunity to minister to you. And then finally the person was like, well, okay. I was like, so how much was the hotel and how much was the food bill? It's like $1,500. And you didn't want to admit that you needed help. Well, and then some people, the pride came because they've been turned away from other agencies. And so that, and then sometimes I think people think when you help them, they're going to be strings attached. So what I did with this person was, they told us what the amount was. I ran it by my pro tem. My pro tem was like, well, give them this much. She went above and beyond. And so then she gave me her cash. She gave us her cash app. We dropped the money in the account. She said, thank you. We said, God bless, and went on about our way. We didn't keep calling and harassing or any of that stuff. We dropped it and we left and went on to the next person. Sometimes you just have to just shake people and be like, we're trying to help you. Don't let these people leave and you haven't been helped now. Because then when they leave, you're going to be like, can somebody help me? We're like, well, the whole tree trimming company, all of them are gone. They were here trying to find some trees. So you just have to be frank with people. And then some people aren't going to hear you because they're going to be so traumatized and so devastated. And it's not pride, it's the trauma. Because we were trying to help one particular family, and I won't give out the details, but they would not receive help. And now they're kicking themselves in the foot. But I tried to get somebody to go around the immediate family to another family member, so that way they could get the help on the back end. So when reality set in, it would be there, but it didn't happen. And now that window is gone. And now they didn't get the help that people wanted to give them. And so they denied people that moment to minister to them. So that was
okay. All right, y'all. So we've got a few more moments left. So please drop your questions, Sister Angie. Great question. And so, Reverend, can you, okay, we got another question here. Okay. Each phase of the crisis requires new treatment methods. How do you know when to shift from crisis mode?
When you're gonna shift a bunch of times. You're gonna have that first wave with the toiletries. Okay, so those are the immediate needs. And as you all know, working with hurricanes. Then the next phase, people are gonna need clothes. You have to listen to them and see what it is that you have an excess of, and then move to something else. You know when to shift when your church is stockpiling certain things that you can't get rid of. We don't need no more toothbrushes or toothpaste. We don't need no more hand sanitizer. Let's move on to getting people shoes, getting them gift cards to Shoe Carnival, these different shoe stores. And then people will start to tell you what they need. Like we moved from accepting items to accepting cash to moving into the how can we help pay your rent phase, your security deposit, because believe it or not, people still had to pay security deposits. Yeah, that's what we said. But then when we start to shift, because they're going to be in crisis mode for a while, just because they lost everything. Just think about losing everything in your house. And now you're starting over from scratch. It's worse than a fire, because even in a fire, there's certain items that you can salvage. But when you see cranes coming and just picking up globs of stuff and just putting it in containers, they've lost memories, they've lost family heirlooms, they've lost jewelry. So that's going to be with them for a while. But as you shift, you just continue to remind them that, even though you're going to enter into a phase of a new normal, we're still going to be here to try to help you and walk you through. So we're going to continue to be here, even once you get your house set up, once you get your new furniture, because there's going to still be different things that you want, desire, need. We're still going to walk with you until you say, you know what, I got it from here.
So, Pastor, I believe the Black church at its finest hour is when we are ministering holistically to the family, to the individual. And I think crisis allows that to happen. I will never forget, T.D. Jakes said to some pastors, never waste a crisis. And what he meant by that, that was a time where real leaders emerge. I think also you and other clergy members in the community have become social worker, have become crisis counselor. In addition to your pastor, your priestly, and your prophetic functions, how did you get the self-care that you needed after you had poured so much out? In dealing with, we just did a series in February on mental health, and we had therapists on in our sermon chat. And one of the things that we asked them, how do you unwind, detach from? So how have you taken care of you in the midst of all that you've experienced, not only in this tornado, but pandemic and all this other stuff?
That's a good question as well. You guys have some really good questions. One of the things, number one, I have a therapist. You can go on telehealth, one of these online things. You can find somebody, because my thing is I just want somebody to listen and just let me talk for a minute. And then once I'm done talking, because talk therapy isn't for everybody, I like to build stuff. So I'm what I call a YouTube woodworker, so a DIYer. With one of the houses that we were removing the trees from, I took a bunch of stumps and they're still drying out, and I'm going to turn those into some tables. So I come home and I'll pick up a piece of wood and I start trying to figure out what I'm going to make next, because that makes me feel good to be able to see me turn something that seemingly that they were going to throw on the side of the road into something that's beautiful.
I told y'all she was MacGyver. Go ahead.
And one of the girls, she kept saying, look at this one, take this one too. I'm like, I can't take all the wood, but stuff like that really helps me. Just finding that mental space, and that's a moment that I share with the wood, because then I'm sitting at the wood, looking at the wood, like, this a disaster knocked down the tree, but I can take this from this disaster and make something beautiful out of it, because I plan on taking the table that I make to the homeowners and giving it to them, because it was the tree that fell on their house. But turning it into something beautiful. So that's how my mind starts to operate. I need that alone time with whatever hobby I'm working with, to think and so that I can see God in the moment and see the bigger picture. Because the tornado is one aspect of the story, but those that run out to help is another aspect, and the beauty that resonates and that comes from that right there, it gives me hope. It inspires me, and it takes away a lot of the anxiety, because sometimes what the anxiety is that if this happens to me, will there be people there to help me get through it? And seeing all these people, it encourages me.
I think that's really wonderful that you talked about your woodworking, because if we think back during the pandemic, I saw, and I don't know what the brothers were doing, but I saw sisters who were finding crafts and different ways of creatively expressing themselves that they might not have turned to had we never gone on lockdown. There were businesses that were launched. There were all kinds of crafts. We had people who were cricketing and people who were doing bead work and just all kinds of things. And I think that is another beautiful way to reflect what happens during the Lenten season, that while we are going through this, watching Jesus, he's creative. He continues to be creative throughout his entire lifetime, and inspires us, if we'll let him, to be compassionate, creative, and caring. Yeah, and all of these things are not just something that we're going to think about or something that we're going to, it's actually doing things. And I think that's beautiful.
Because it allowed me, woodworking allows me to see God in a variety of ways. Number one, there's this tree that starts from a seed that grows into this big thing, and then they cut it down and plane it, and then I can take that and turn it into a table, a desk, what have you. And all to think that it came from this one little seed. And God allows us to use these resources to build certain things and do so much with. And so then you start to want to realize that God has given us so many resources. Yes, the tornado took out a whole bunch of stuff, but look at what God left us with. Look at what we have left. Look at how God moves. And like you said, that whole creativity, because people started doing stuff they didn't even know they could do. That's
So Reverend, you talked about how you unwind. How have you been ministered to? So are there certain things that you've read that have helped, resources that you would recommend, books that have ministered to you? I'm always, I believe leaders are learners and learners are leaders, and I believe leaders are readers and readers are leaders. So what have you been reading that
I like to watch documentaries.
Okay.
Or read biographies. So I watched Toni Morrison's documentary, The Pieces That I Am. I've read. I also like to read about the Holocaust, and I watched some movies. I actually watched Schindler's List for the first time. And so when I watch documentaries, I listen and see how people have overcome certain adversities and how they have triumphed, and to see where people where they came from to where they're at this particular point. And that inspires me. That ministers to me. I watched Colin Kaepernick's.
I watched that too.
That was beautiful.
Yeah,
that was well done. That was so well done. And so that's how I'm pretty. If you listen to me, I'm good. I get inspiration from seeing people who I feel have hit their peak, like Toni Morrison. And seeing their stories and how they got there, and the humility that takes them there, and that inspires and ministers to me. And then also, run around trying to take care of my cousins and my family, and them that inspires me and it motivates me, especially when somebody says thank you. That's all. I'm good if you say thank you. I'm great. So yeah.
We've got a question here, and then I got to come back with one more question after this. Where do you start when you want to help but are too far detached from the situation, making sure your money or items or help gets to those who truly need it?
That's a good question. What I found during this tornado is that people started calling churches and asking if we were helping, because they wanted to make sure that the money got directly to the people. And what I do is I give an account of the money to whoever donated it to tell them, how we spent your money. So always find a local agency that's in the community, like a church or something. One of the things that the people in Bowling Green have said, and I love this, is that they said the churches did more for the people than FEMA and Red Cross. Because the churches organized a lot of the cleanups. The churches were open, multiple days from this church to that church. There's one church that had a porch ministry. So every morning they got out and they put bagged food on the porch, and you could just come by and get it. So get it to the people that are actually there, that are hands-on, boots on the ground, where you see that they're actually giving out stuff. Send it to those agencies, because that's where the people are going to come, and those are the people that are going to give it to the people with no strings attached, because you don't want to get caught up in red tape. Send the money here and we're going to send it there, and then they're going to send it here. Give it to those who you see actively doing it in the community. When you give to these big, large nonprofits, they spend money on airfare, their hotel accommodations. They spend money to bring their vans with their logo on it, and then they want to stand on the corner and pray. And I was like, you're not going to use my church to do that. Not if you're not handing out checks. So give it to those who are actually there on the ground doing the work. And you can, anytime there's a disaster, you can just start searching Facebook, and people will start telling you, well, I went to this church and they gave me tons of food, or I went to this place and they gave me, the power drills and stuff. Those are going to be the ones that you want to donate to.
Yeah. So you're saying churches. Churches are the people who are ground zero. Churches who are really doing things, because we know we got churches who are churches, but they might not be doing nothing. But
I'm just going to say it like this. We got hierarchies in churches where sometimes it's better to send it to the church than the hierarchy. I'll just leave that right there.
Send it directly to the church in that area. And it may not be a church that it may not even be a denomination that you're a part of, but give it to the one that you see doing the work. Because they're going to get it to the people.
Well, we've had a great time today, and I want to thank you, Pastor, for taking time out during this Lenten season to remind us to reflect on um, on following the path of Jesus and how Jesus ministered to the masses in crisis, because the Gospels are full of crisis stories and how you were um, God's representative, God's hands and God's feet leading. And like you said, in order to lead, I must listen. Because a lot of folks have ideas. Now, I want to listen, and then we can see how we're going to move forward. So we want to thank you again. I want to thank the tech team. I want to thank you who invited us into your homes on this Tuesday night. We are so grateful. And don't forget, Reverend Kennedy led one of our prayer calls on last year. And so we have another. And tomorrow, I think we have Pastor Murat, who's going to call in from Haiti.
Amen.
Who's going to lead our prayer call. And praise God for the mute button. Hallelujah. Oh, bless his name. Grateful. And don't forget, my brothers and sisters, we will re-enter church in person the first Sunday in April. So we look forward, and we'll be rolling out registration and other materials as well. Thank you, Reverend. You got anything you want to add?
No, I just thank you, Reverend, for being with us. Thank you for your transparency. Thank you for letting us in on your special creativity and special gift. I love that. Maybe next time we'll get you to share with us some pictures of your work, because now I'm real curious. But
Awesome.
thank you for the work that God is doing through you, and thank you for sharing your witness to that work with all of us.
Thank you all for having me. It's been a pleasure. And one of the things that I teach my people is we help people because there is a need, not because we want to get our name in the paper.
My Lord, listen.
Amen.
So,
All right. Everybody, God bless. Thank you so much.